Hanau is in central Germany, 15 miles east of Frankfurt. A major rail junction, it also has a port on the River Main. Since the 16th century, it's been a centre for precious metal working. It's the birthplace of the Brothers Grimm. But less well known is the deportation of its entire Jewish population during the Holocaust, and in particular on the afternoon of May the 30th, 1942. For most of Hanau's residents, May the 30th was just another Saturday. But 19 photographs were taken that day by a teacher called Franz Weber. They show the deportation of nearly 100 Jews from Hanau station. In March 1933, there were 447 Jews in Hanau, about 1% of the town's population. There was a synagogue, a cemetery, a Mikvah, 3 charitable societies, and a school attended by 75 children. Jews were active in the commercial life of the town and played a key role in the gold, silver, and precious stones industries that had earned Hanau the nickname Town of Precious Jewels. The April 1933 boycott of Jewish premises was the first of many actions throughout the 1930s, causing many of Hanau's Jews to immigrate to the United States, Palestine, South Africa, or other destinations. At Christmas 1937, Hitler directed Julius Streicher to stage the first official boycott of Jewish business since 1933, and on 15th of May 1938, the local SS branch in Hanau boasted, "Last Saturday, an action against Jewish business was launched by the party. People were warned about going into Jewish shops, and people who, despite the warnings, did so, were photographed on leaving the same, and signposted by signs saying, 'I bought from Jews. Who buys from Jews is a traitor,' or 'I am a Jewish slave.' This action has met with great approval from the population, and it is hoped that the remaining Jewish businesses will soon disappear." Franz Weber, born in 1898, was a teacher in Hanau and enthusiastic about the relatively new medium of photography. He took his pictures on glass plates, and in 1928 was commissioned to establish a photo archive for school education. Weber became the first director of the picture archive and began taking photos to document the city. This is Hanau's 1938 Autumn Fair. This is Rosenstrasse, where it seems anyone who did not hang out a swastika might have aroused suspicion. This is the Jewish-owned Sternheimers. This is the inside of Hanau Synagogue. And, by contrast, some enthusiastic participants at a Hitler Youth rally in the town. Weber returned to Hanau Synagogue in November 1938 when on Kristallnacht the building was burnt out. Torah scrolls were desecrated and tombstones overturned in the nearby Jewish cemetery. Several hundred people watched, including 2 you can see hanging out of the window on the left. The graffiti on the wall of the synagogue, verkauflich, i.e. for sale, was a remnant of the May shop's boycott. The municipal house and ritual bath at Nürnberger Strasse 3 was stormed, and a teacher living there called Sulzberger died of his injuries after being kicked in the stomach by SA thugs. Mobs ransacked the house of the rabbi, Dr. Gradenwitz, at Wilhelmstrasse 22. He fled to Holland, but was rounded up later and sent from Westerbork to his death in Auschwitz in 1943. In November 1938, the Schwab family were typical of those targeted by the mobs. Max Schwab was a successful diamond and precious stones dealer. Aged 54 and a World War I veteran, he was a well-known community member. His wife Martha had grown up in an observant Jewish home, and they lived together with their 2 children, Rudolf 21 and Hans 7. The Schwab ancestry went back in Hanau for over 300 years, but their home was looted and possessions smashed. Max was out of town, Rudolf had already emigrated to South Africa, and neighbours found Martha and her son Hans hiding in the garden. She was unconscious and had been sexually assaulted. Across Hanau, Jewish shops were raided and looted. This is a picture by Franz Weber of Berger and Schmelz's boarded-up confectionery shop. Others looted were Speyer's shoes, Kahn's laundry, Halbrun's leather goods, and Strauss's furniture store. 40 Jewish men were deported to Buchenwald and held there for some weeks. The International Tracing Service archives include many records of Hanau Jews sent there. The oldest was Jacob Kahn, 56, born in December 1882 in the village of Langendiebach, 5 miles northeast of Hanau. Money administration cards show he was prisoner number 25267 and in Buchenwald from 29th of November 1938 until the 14th of December, when he was entlassen or dismissed. Also there was Bernhard Blumenthal, prisoner number 25134. He was there longer, from the 30th of November 1938 until the 16th of January 1939. Hermann Wolff, a storeman, was in on the 11th of November, out on the 1st of December, but back in again on the 11th of January, and not finally entlassen until the 12th of April 1939. Walter Schwartz, prisoner number 24700, also in for about a fortnight, as was Ludwig Gernsheimer, prisoner number 24744, from Rückingham near Hanau. Robert Eisenstadt again in twice, first from the 11th of November until the 1st of December, and then again until the 15th of February 1939. And Julius Lilienfeld there from the 29th of November until the 6th of December. Many of these men would be on the May 30th transport from Hanau. Nazi boycotts and physical persecution had a telling effect, so that by May 1939 the number of Jews in Hanau had dwindled to 107. By the summer there were 82, in October 1939 just 40, and by June 1940 the Jewish community consisted of about 15 families. The synagogue was a roofless, boarded-up ruin, and the remaining Jewish families, which included the Schwabs, were crowded into so-called ghetto houses, including Langstrasse 53, Markstrasse 28, and Nürnberger Strasse 3. After Kristallnacht, Max Schwab and his brother Alex had been taken to Buchenwald, where after 2 weeks they were released on the 26th of November. Then, in late 1941, Max was arrested for the second time along with his Aryan neighbour for purchasing wine from a non-Jewish trader. On the 2nd of February 1942 he was taken to Sachsenhausen, where he died 17 days later. The Jews that remained or had been released from Buchenwald were used for forced labour clearing snow in the winter of 1941, and here working in the municipal building yard, wearing Jewish star armbands introduced in September 1941. All these pictures by Franz Weber. And so we come to May the 30th, 1942, a beautiful early summer day judging by the light clothing of other travellers. Researchers have managed to identify several people in the pictures. The front of this line is 37-year-old Jenny Hahn from Bergen, wearing a yellow star. Behind her is Minna Weil, also from Bergen, with her 11-year-old son Richard. The little boy peering out at the back is 6-year-old Hans Gernsheimer from Rückingham, a village 20 kilometres east of Frankfurt. In total, 86 Jewish people were on this train from Hanau to Kassel, 11 aged between 13 and 18, including Martha Schwab and her son Hans. The operation is being supervised by the Orpo, Nazi Germany's uniformed police force. The loading begins. Nazi guidelines oblige the deportees to bring the sum of 50 Reichsmarks to pay the cost of the deportation. A suitcase or backpack weighing up to 50 kilograms, a set of clothes, suitable shoes, bedding, tableware, and food supplies for 2 weeks. It's May, yet the travellers are wearing as much clothing as possible and as much luggage as they can carry. They expect to be transported to live and work in the East. The man with the trilby and backpack is Moritz Levy, talking to members of his family from Ostheim. The person with the large rucksack has been identified as 30-year-old Hermann Wolff. The girl on the left with the shoulder bag is Hannelore Stein. Bending down at the back of this queue is Minna Weil with one of her 2 sons. We're now on platform 2, and here again is Minna Weil with 15-year-old Walter and 11-year-old Richard. Minna was born in Bergen, the daughter of horse dealer Hermann Hess. In March 1918 she married painter and artist Max Weil, born in 1883 in Switzerland. The couple had 2 other children. The oldest, Julius, had emigrated to New York in 1937 and joined the US Army, and daughter Hildegard, born in 1921, went to the USA in 1938. Husband Max had returned to Switzerland and, according to this document, was still alive in 1949. Here, heading for the train, is Jenny Hahn again. She was the daughter of merchant Julius Hahn, who died in hospital on February 18, 1942. Her sister Frieda, born in 1903, was also on this transport. Jenny had been working as a so-called volunteer for Brown Radio, and her sister as a postal clerk and telephone operator. Both had tried to emigrate without success. It's 1:25 on platform 2. The train had 4 third-class carriages, ample room for the 86 passengers. In the middle of this picture is Hannelore Stein again, a week shy of 18, pushing past Clara Levy and her son Walter. On the left, 29-year-old Dr. Bernhard Blumenthal from Niederrodenbach, with suitcase marked with his name, place of residence and card number. On the right, carrying the luggage belonging to Ludwig Gernsheimer, who's behind him, is Julius Lilienfeld. Married to a non-Jew, he's spared from this deportation, but will later be transported to Theresienstadt. All three men had already been interned in Buchenwald after Kristallnacht. Here again are the Levies. In the centre of this picture with the enormous backpack is Walter, and to his right is Mother Clara, a maiden named Katz, with her husband Moritz. Here they are again, in the middle with the backpack, it's Moritz Levy. Young Walter's facing the camera and standing in front of his mother Clara. Here on the right is 17-year-old Hannelore Stein again, with a shoulder bag on which you can see the added name Sarah. And Julius Lilienfeld with the cap is still holding on to Ludwig Gernsheimer's suitcase. The Levis, Clara with son Walter, are on the left, and the tall man in the middle with the armband is Walter Schwartz, also from Ruckingen. This is a terrifying image. Among those pictured are the Levis from Ostheim, 13-year-old Kurt on the far left, his mother Clara wearing the hat, cut off on the left. The tall man on the right is Ludwig Gernsheimer, the chairman of the Jewish community of Ruckingen and Kurt Levi's uncle. The two little boys are his sons, Hans aged 6 and Lothar aged 4. The girl at the back is Hannelore Stein again. The man with his back to us is yet again Julius Lilienfeld. Everyone in the picture except for him have less than a week to live. This is the same group getting onto the train. Ludwig Gernsheimer is standing next to his suitcase and Julius Lilienfeld is next to him. The oldest person on this transport was 70-year-old Johanna Kahn from Langendiebach, deported with her 60-year-old husband Jacob and 31-year-old daughter Irma. In order to ensure the requisite 1,000 people required by the SS for a deportation transport, the Hanau group had to join up with two others, and so the train travelled via Fulda to Kassel, where it arrived in the evening. The deportees were taken off the train to the main assembly site, a school building on Schillerstrasse near the train station, which had been used as a previous deportation. They spent up to 2 nights in the school, sleeping on the floor or sitting on benches, armed police surrounding the building. A standard practice for all deportations, the Jews were isolated while their luggage and persons were searched for valuables by the regional tax office and the Gestapo. The transport that left Kassel on June 1, 1942 was the second of 3 mass deportations from the district. Approximately 509 Jews were deported, 87 from Kassel. The others came from various other towns and districts, including the group from Hanau. Another 500 Jews from the Chemnitz district joined this transport when the train passed through Saxony, making up the required 1,000 passengers. Robert Eisenstadt, who we've already met due to his 4-month stay in Buchenwald, described the journey. Tuesday afternoon we reached the German-Polish border. The last German station was Lissa. Here water was supposed to be supplied, but the stop was so short that most of the bottles remained empty. The train went into motion after the doors were closed again. There were long halts to enable important transport and military vehicles to pass. It was very hot. It was forbidden to open the windows. SS police patrolled both sides of the train when it stopped. The water bottles were empty, and the food supplies and the coffee had also been depleted. There was a stifling smell in the wagon. In the direction of Germany, freight trains travelled steadily, transporting Russian workers. Because of the muggy heat, the hunger and thirst, and the desperate situation, the people became utterly despondent. After 2 days, on June 3, 1942, the train stopped at Lublin. All the men from the age of 15, between 98 and 115 people, had to get off. According to Robert Eisenstadt, who was among them, this happened in such a rush that the parting men had no time to bid goodbye to their loved ones. From Lublin station, the men were marched to Majdanek concentration camp for forced labour. Most of them stayed alive only a few months. According to current research, the remaining women, children, teenagers, and people over 55 years of age were probably driven directly to the Sobibor extermination camp without stopping at the overcrowded Izbica transfer camp. In Sobibor, they were all gassed on arrival. As the Hanau train left for Kassel, this picture shows 3 men remaining behind, probably the older heads of the Jewish communities. The man on the right was earlier carrying a coat, which he'd since given to one of the passengers. Transport DA-57 from Kassel to Sobibor was not the last to affect the Jews of Hanau. In August and September 1942, 3 more large transports took 3,501, mostly elderly Jews, from Frankfurt to Theresienstadt. On the first of these later transports was 83-year-old Leopold Sternheimer, whose shop we'd seen photographed by Franz Weber. He was deported on transport 12/1 DA 503, passenger number 900 out of 1,009, from Frankfurt to Theresienstadt on the 18th of August 1942. He died there 3 weeks later on the 3rd of September. Here's the transport record and his Theresienstadt death certificate. Only 17 people on this transport survived the war. A second large deportation of the older people and World War I veterans who had been exempt in May took place in September 1942, involving 95 Jews from the 3 districts, including Hanau. This group was also sent by train to Kassel and taken to the collection centre at the school, where again their valuables were stolen. The following day, September the 7th, the Hanau group, together with a much larger group of deportees from Chemnitz, was sent in a joint transport 12/2 DA 509 of approximately 1,000 Jews to Theresienstadt. Among them were Julius Blumenthal, his wife Silva, and their disabled son Ismar, the parents of Bernhard and Adolf, already deported in May. 26 Jews from the Hanau transport were transferred 3 weeks later to Treblinka. Others from this transport were later sent to Auschwitz and murdered on the 16th of May 1944. From this Auschwitz group, only 3 elderly women survived until liberation. Other transports left on the 15th of September 1942, the 12th of April 1943, and the 16th of June 1943. This last one contained what were described as the last full Jews of Frankfurt. 5 survived out of 19 transported. The final deportation from the Hanau district took place as late as 18th of February 1945 and included 21 Jews who were married to non-Jews. Among them was Julius Lilienfeld, who we'd last seen on the platform in Hanau. This transport, numbered 12/10, travelled in freight cars from Frankfurt station to Theresienstadt, arriving on February the 18th. Julius was number 585 of 616. All but 6 survived until the liberation. Lilienfeld and his wife both survived the Holocaust together with his 2 brothers, Siegfried and Ludwig, and returned to Ruckingen in the spring of 1945. These are records from their time in DP camps in 1945. Back to May in Hanau. It was standard practice for the regional and local tax offices to carry out the expropriation of the deportees' remaining property. They were usually sold by auction houses that maintained good relations with the Gestapo. Here in Hanau, our intrepid photographer Franz Weber recorded the auction of household items from the deported Jews. Most seemed pretty pleased with the operation. Retribution was, however, coming. Medieval Hanau was obliterated in 2 devastating air raids by British Bomber Command. In January 1945, 482 aircraft from 4 bomber squadrons targeted Hanau and its important railway junction. The mission report said that many bombs did fall in this area, but also that a large proportion of the bombing was scattered in the south, into the centre of Hanau, and to the north, into an area of countryside and villages. 6 planes were lost in the raid. Hanau was again struck by 285 British bombers on the 19th of March 1945, a few days before it was taken by the US Army. Around 87% of the town was destroyed. Hanau lost its old monuments, and the medieval section of the city was levelled. The ancient castle, arsenal, city theatre, and the birthplace of the Brothers Grimm were destroyed. Only 7 houses remained in the city centre. In 1965, only 19 Jews lived in Hanau. A memorial has been unveiled at the former synagogue site, and by 2005, a new congregation of more than 250 members was founded. Part of Hanau's Ghetto Wall survived the bombing and today bears memorial plaques to those deported. One of them is for Henrietta Eisenstadt, the mother of Robert Eisenstadt, whom we heard from earlier. Robert had been deported along with his mother Henrietta, his unmarried sister Martha, and her 4-year-old son Heinz, as well as other siblings Willie, 24, Rosa, 17, and the youngest Heinrich, 14. Robert's sister Martha had had her child with Hans Weider, but according to the Nuremberg race laws of September 1935, he was not permitted to marry her since she was Jewish. In December 1942, Hans was back in Hanau on leave from the Russian front when he heard that Martha and his son were not in hiding but had been deported. Robert's family were all murdered on the 3rd of June at Sobibor, but miraculously he survived. Born in 1919, Robert, as we know, had already been imprisoned in Buchenwald after Kristallnacht. From December 1940 to April 1942, he worked in a mattress factory in Frankfurt. There he met and fell in love with another Jewish labourer, Eva Müller, and they became engaged. Robert managed to escape from Majdanek during an unguarded moment on July 10, 1942, and seriously battered from the abuse in the concentration camp, made it back to the home of his Jewish fiancée in Frankfurt, where he was able to hide in the attic. Because Eva Müller was also threatened with deportation, she asked her non-Jew former family doctor Fritz Kahl for help. He secretly visited her and treated Robert Eisenstadt's injuries. The engaged couple wanted to escape to Switzerland. Eva Müller even got pregnant, since Dr. Kahl thought they would probably not be sent back to Germany as illegal refugees by the Swiss authorities if she were expecting. Together with his wife Margarete and other helpers, Dr. Kahl planned the couple's escape. Robert meanwhile hid at various locations in Hanau and Frankfurt, finally also with the Kahls. In December 1942, Hans Weber, effectively Robert's brother-in-law, offered to help and gave him his leather boots, food, and procured forged Wehrmacht identity papers for him as Wilhelm Stiegelow. Hans Weber then had to return to his unit on the Eastern Front. He did not survive the war. In February 1943, Eva Müller and Robert Eisenstadt successfully crossed the border into Switzerland. In July 1943, their daughter Maria was born in Basel. The family emigrated to New York in 1947. Robert, aged 76, died on the 17th of February 1996 in Salt Lake City. His sister Herta, who'd managed to get away from Germany after Kristallnacht, died in September 2008, aged 95, also in Utah. After the war, when Frankfurt was liberated by the Americans, American soldiers looked up Dr. Fritz and Margarete Kahl, bringing them regards from several Frankfurt Jews they had helped and who had managed to emigrate before the war had broken out. On January the 22nd, 2006, Yad Vashem recognized Dr. Fritz and Margarete Kahl as righteous among the nations.